also toured the world supporting bands like Animals as Leaders, Periphery, Tesseract, and Intervals, and was even the first instrumental act ever to play on the legendary Download Festival in the UK. He's here today to share his expertise with us, so please give him a great round of applause for Plini.
You have to teach then. Hello. Welcome back to me, and welcome to you guys. How many of you have seen me here before? Okay, cool. So I can say mostly a lot of the same things, and it'll appear new. Basically, what I like to do, I've been coming here since, I think, 2016, almost every year, and it's something that I find incredibly fun. And what I've realized the more that I've come here is I continue to know very little. And actually, I was just talking before about how going to a music school is a very particular thing. I didn't go to a music school, but I think everyone I know that did, which is all the members of my band and a lot of my friends, have managed to learn a lot of stuff in a very short time and meet a lot of people, and that's hopefully what you're all doing. But I guess my purpose in being here is for you to basically ask anything you like about anything you like to do with playing guitar or writing music or music business or anything like that, and I can happily tell you my experience of it. So if anyone has a question straight away, feel free. Yes? Yeah, I guess funnily enough, most of what I'm using is basically like a modified Marshall. It's just in digital form. How many people here own an amp? Yeah, so I've never owned an amp, and probably the people that didn't raise their hand may never own an amp either. When I first started recording music, I shouldn't say this, but I downloaded a cracked version of Guitar, what was it called? Guitar Rig 4. It was like one of the first amp modeling softwares. And what I could do with it, I couldn't make it sound very good, but that was how I started playing guitar, was through this digital thing, which like didn't have anything that a nice amp has. So every now and then I'll like hang out with a friend that owns an amp and I'll play it and I'm actually scared because it's so loud and so like immediate and obvious where you're wrong, whereas I'm used to like a guitar into a digital compressor, into a digital compressed drive coming out of a laptop speaker. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a guitar. So I started off doing that, and then as I kept going, technology got better and better. Pretty much the reason that I got a job was to save up for an Axe-Fx. When I think it might have been when Australia first had a distributor selling the Axe-Fx, there was like a 2-year wait list. So I was like, if I work for 2 years, by the time my name comes up, I can afford to buy it. So I was using an Axe-Fx for a while. Now I'm using the Quad Cortex. But yeah, the main is a Friedman, which is kind of a modified Marshall, because again, I would look at the players who I admired, and they were all on stages with real amps that looked like Marshalls and Friedmans. So I would get this digital modeler and just go through the amps in it and click the one that looks or sound is the name of the thing that I was used to seeing. And more now, I'm loving those old tones, which often have like a bit of edge that you don't necessarily get with digital, which you could definitely do with the digital stuff. Like another thing that I'm enjoying doing at the moment is putting like a fake room. So if you listen to like older Queens of the Stone Age and bands like that, you can hear there's like a mic in a room and a guitar cab, probably not even that close to the mic. So I really like that kind of more rough sound, probably because I spent 10 or 15 years just trying to get the like kind of tightest digital guitar sound that I could. At this point, I've totally forgotten the question, if you'd like to remind me. Yeah. 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 And I can't say for sure because I don't actually like design any of this equipment, but I imagine that the effect of recording has sort of shaped the way uh, the sounds come out of these things. Like if you're recording a metal band with an amp, you're going to try and play it as tightly as you can, like over and over again, to get rid of all those weird sounds. Like a lot of guitarists, I don't have this issue, but start taping their headstocks so you don't get the like string noise from behind the nut. Basically doing everything you can to make the recording as clean as possible. And then someone like Misha from Periphery who makes pedals, like he made this drive pedal, which is basically meant to boost an amp to get that super tight, like controlled low end, and to have like a really tight noise gate. So the sound that comes out of the amp is closer to what you would get in a recording than like maybe what you're used to plugging straight into an amp. And then so these things are kind of like going after that end of things, like where it's what you're taking out of this is basically the finished product. And which is interesting because I also grew up trying to like rip off Periphery. So when I was recording riffs, I was trying to make them sound as close to a Periphery mix as possible. And now that I've been doing it for a while, I'm more trying to like do a Queens of the Stone Age thing. And it's like I have no clue because I don't have amps. I don't even have like a room. Like the room is just, it's all digital. So it's kind of fun trying to figure that out. So probably in 10 to 15 years, you'll probably come back and ask your teachers if you can borrow their gear, because I'm sure they know better. Thank you. Anybody else? Sure. Could everybody hear, by the way, the question? Okay, the question was, why do I play in a drop C sharp tuning and how do I communicate with other players because of the tuning difference? Yeah, so I'm in drop C sharp, which is basically drop D, but everything's down an extra half step. When I was first learning guitar, or like a little bit further down into learning guitar, I was learning a lot of classic rock, like Guns N' Roses and Velvet Revolver and that sort of thing, which is down a half step. So that's how I ended up down a half step. But I was also learning like Lamb of God and Trivium and all these like drop D metal bands. So I somehow just ended up doing both. And a lot of the music I recorded before I'd ever played a show, I used different tunings. I think I used drop C on a song, I used standard on a song. But then when it came time to play live, I was only going to have one guitar, so I relearnt I either transposed or relearnt the parts to be in drop. And I think now, because I know I'm going to have to eventually play it live, I sort of stick to the drop tuning. Although I do want to I have a 7-string, I do want to record more with it, and I would love to get an 8-string. But then in terms of communicating, it's always really funny, again, because I'm sort of the least educated member of my band. We were in Montreal recently, and a keyboard player called Anomaly came to the show to play with us and was asking something about a key, and I was like, oh, it's just E minor. And Simon, my bass player, was like, it's not E minor, it's E flat minor. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then again, like in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a John Petrucci guitar camp, and you're going to be there? I can't wait to meet. The first time I met John Petrucci was me as like a 15-year-old at a meet and greet. So I can't wait to be equally as nervous and sweaty. The one thing that I'm excited about is I'm pretty sure I'm taller than him. That's like pretty much all I have going for me, but it should be good. But yeah, so doing this camp, I think I'm doing a couple of classes a day, like one more beginner and one more advanced. And I think one of them I'm doing with Aaron Marshall, who plays with intervals. And he plays on a 6-string, mostly in standard or drop D. So we figured we're both going to set up, like in the quad cortex, a pitch shift. He'll have a -1 and I'll have a +1, and then we'll just kind of like scissors, paper, rock to see who's going to meet. Or maybe we could both do half. That would be kind of disgusting. I might actually ask him if he wants to do that. But basically, yes, this tuning has led to a lot of silly communication, especially with non-guitarists, like trying to tell the key to a saxophone player or a keyboard player and remembering I need to transpose. But I guess this is something like once you've spent a bunch of time with another musician, is you start to learn how each other communicate. So Jake, my guitarist, he knows if I say E, I mean E flat. He knows if I say E flat, it's because I thought about it a little more and I meant E flat. So you kind of get to know each other in that way. But I guess another thing that I'm a little bit afraid of is going into like these guitar camps. I'm probably going to be on a stage with like 5 or 6 ridiculous guitarists who are all in standard tuning and can just be like, I know where I am, and then I'm going to have to play in all these unfamiliar keys like C minor or D sharp or something. It's going to be scary. But so hopefully that answers the question. Yep. I was actually having a conversation with somebody, I forget who, about why fewer people seem to like instrumental progressive guitar music than like hip hop or modern pop. And I guess for me, and probably for everyone here who listens to probably a wide variety of things, you probably like them all equally. Like you'll listen to a Dream Theater song and listen to a Travis Scott song and be like, these are both songs and I like them. For me, one thing that I really like about the sort of music that I make is that it's not that cool, and it probably never will be. It kind of almost was for a little bit in the 70s, and then almost was for a little bit when Dream Theater did Pull Me Under. But aside from that, it's like, it's not mainstream. And the thing that makes that really fun for me is that means I can do anything I want, and I'm not worried, like, will this song be commercially successful, or like, is my career going to be over if I experiment with like using a different instrument or using a different guitar tone? It's kind of like I can do whatever, and a small group of people will be like, yeah, cool, man. So that makes it feel a lot more comfortable for experimenting. And I guess that's kind of the point of the genre, is people started to introduce elements of other genres into like classic rock or into metal, like using keyboards or using different instruments, or even not having a singer. At a certain point, it became acceptable to have a metal band with no singer. Again, I've forgotten the question. I'm going to play another song. Thank you. And something that occurred to me while I was playing, just to continue that topic, one of the main things that keeps me inspired with writing new music, and the thing that makes me think that I'll probably just do this until I die, is because of the way that I think about the genre, there's always something new to do. Like, as long as there's other music in the world for me to listen to and enjoy, there's always something new to try and do. So I guess if I was in a metalcore band or something where the sort of the limitations of the genre might feel stronger, like you wouldn't typically use a clean guitar, or you wouldn't typically have an orchestra or something like that. With this genre, it sort of feels genreless. I mean, if I started putting out trap beats, I would probably play to some pretty empty rooms. But it doesn't mean I couldn't start putting like little digital hi-hats in stuff, or like an 808 kick. So I try to listen to as much different music as possible and get into other genres. I'm still yet to figure out country music, but I bet sometime down the road I'm going to try and learn proper finger picking or like get a banjo, and it'll kind of keep me inspired to try something new. And that makes it constantly exciting and also constantly a challenge, because whenever I get into something that I'm not familiar with, there's like a whole learning curve of how do I incorporate this. Like, I guess, how many people here write and record music? And how many of you feel that there's a lot of things you don't know about music production? Yeah, there's always more. There's always like a new synth plugin, and there's always someone with a better mix. And you're like, how do I do that? There was a time where you didn't understand literally anything. Like, you talk to a friend that doesn't live in the music world and say compressor, and they'll be like, what? It sounds like an 80s sci-fi like contraption or something to make you small. So there's constantly new things to learn and to be bad at, and I find that's like the best form of inspiration, is letting yourself be really bad at something while you figure it out, but in a sort of stress-free environment. And I guess, again, that's why something like going to a music school is great, because you get to come to the school at the beginning being bad at a lot of things you probably don't even know you're bad at, but the music school is like, don't worry, we got you. Like, in a year or 2 years or something, you'll leave knowing a lot of stuff really well. So that's why I enjoy this genre, is because I feel like I can constantly try something new, and it keeps it fun. Next question. Yep.
Is there a specific part of like navigating the music industry that you found to be particularly for you personally over the course of your career? Like, how do you get past it?
So the question was, is there a particular part of the music industry that I have found difficult to navigate, and how have I gotten past it? I think the main thing for me has been I think it would be wrong to say not caring, but I guess not being or feeling caught up in certain things about whether they're important or not important. So just, I guess, for some background, I didn't go to music school. I don't have a record label or a manager. And I started out releasing music on the internet for fun, and some people liked it, so I continued to release it and eventually played a show which went well, and someone that was at the show was a friend of a friend who was studying music business at a music school in Sydney, and he told my guitarist that he was going to book us an Australian tour. I didn't know him at the time. I also didn't know that he was doing a subject about booking tours at the time, so his experience was nothing, and he was going to send us around Australia, this person that I hadn't actually met yet. So he did that tour, and I eventually did actually meet him, and we're good friends. And actually now he works for Live Nation in the Middle East, and so he books like Maroon 5 and like At the Pyramids and stuff like that. So I guess he's turned out to be pretty good at it. But so we did that tour, and like he sent me a spreadsheet with a budget, and I was like, what am I looking at? Like, it's just colors and numbers, and it's like parking and vans. And I'm like, this isn't like a video of Steve Vai on YouTube. It's like, that's what I like. But so there've just been moments like that constantly, like for the last 10 or 15 years, where I'm coming into contact with something that I have absolutely no idea about. I remember the first time that I was agreeing to support another band overseas. It started out like, hey, do you want to come to America and do a tour? And I was like, yes, I'd love to come to America and do a tour. But I didn't realize that as an Australian, you need to get a performance visa, which costs thousands of dollars and takes months. So I found that out and had a little panic, like, I don't know anything about immigration law. So I went on the US government website and scrolled through this page that has like the list of different visas, and I'm like, am I applying to be a spouse? No. Am I applying to be like a doctor? No. And I found the one that seemed like it was to do with entertainment, so I looked at the requirements, and I found out there are a bunch of forms you have to fill out, and there was one sort of form that I couldn't find on the internet, so I called the US consulate and was like, hello, I'm applying for a visa to perform in the US, and I don't have, I think it's an I-797 or something like that. And they weren't particularly helpful. But it turns out that that's the thing that you get when a really expensive lawyer that you hire has successfully done everything for you. And then you get the sheet that's like, you can probably go now. So I like quite shyly asked around the musicians that I'd met at this point, like, do you know anyone that's been to the US and like knows how to get a visa? And eventually a friend of a friend's band manager, who is incredibly kind and has continued to tell me things I don't know ever since, was like, yeah, there's this agency that we use in the States. They'll take care of it, basically. And then so I started talking with them, and like, this is the first time I've ever communicated with a lawyer. So I'm like, do I need to put on a suit to send the email? I'm just like terrified. Like doing my best, hi there, kind regards. And like, I know now because I met the guy that does these visas for me, because he was in Australia for a conference, and he's just a guy wearing a t-shirt drinking a beer. And I was like, oh, you're just people. So I went through that whole process, and it was about, I think maybe 2 weeks before we were meant to leave. I was on a camping trip where there was very bad phone reception, and I got an email saying that the visa petition hadn't been refused, but they needed more information. So I'm like out in a field, like holding my phone to the sky, just being like, fuck. So went home, and I needed basically more proof that I was like a real musician who had some sort of track record and deserved to come and like perform here and be paid. And I was like, can I take a screenshot of like someone on MySpace saying something nice? Like, I don't know any of this. Like I didn't have any real press. I didn't even know what press was. And then eventually it all worked out. We only missed a week of shows in Canada. And funnily enough, the last time we came to the States, which was a couple of months ago, again, we missed shows. And this time I was totally confident with every step of the process. But there was just a delay that was out of my control. And so I guess that was in 2016, so that was 7 years ago. In between, I've like done visas and come to the States with absolutely no problem. And then this most recent time, I was like, again, maybe I don't know anything. Maybe I really need a manager. And then I talked to, now I know some more people who know more than me, and I talked to them too. Like one guy who manages lots of pretty big like Australian pop bands, and he was like, yeah, it happens all the time. And then I realized that like there's just a lot of chaos in the music industry constantly. And I mean, I'm sure you all know, because I'm sure you've all done assignments where you haven't slept, or like you have a performance exam and your entire world collapses into you just practicing to do this performance. And then you finally get on stage and do it. You probably played really well, but made like one mistake, and that's all you think about. And you had an awful day. I feel like that's basically the music industry at all times. But the thing that's amazing about it is there's a whole audience of people who will listen to you play music for 5 minutes and then spend the rest of the day thinking about that, being like, today was awesome. Like, I listened to a song I like, I saw a band I like play. This is totally going off on a tangent. But basically, so that's been my attitude continuously, is it's totally okay not to know things, and to ask people when you come across something you don't know. And at the end of the day, at least for me, like the whole point is to make music and to play it. So everything that's not to do with that isn't worth getting too stressed about. Hopefully that answers the question. Guess I'll play another song. And I challenge you, if you haven't asked a question, to think of one, or I'll have to stop picking on you. Do you have a question? Oh, I can't see, sorry. Oh, hey. There's a light right in my eyes, and I just saw your hand. Did everyone hear the question? I was basically about how I've arrived at my style, and was it something I was consciously thinking about, like I want to sound like Plini, or did I kind of come across it? And I guess a bit of both. At some point, I realized that all the bands that I love and all the guitarists I love don't sound like anyone else. And I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to sound like different elements of them. So like with metal bands, Dream Theater was huge for me, trying to figure out how to play in odd time signatures. But then I came across like a drummer like Virgil Donati, who kind of just, who even knows what's happening. So then, even just between those two things, it was like I love the way Dream Theater play in odd time signatures, but I also love the way Virgil Donati plays in like the fourth dimension. And like there aren't, I mean, I'm sure there are, but like I was trying to think, like, is there a band that writes songs that are so like epic and well put together as Dream Theater, but maybe with a drummer who's so like improvisational and confusing? And then I guess now we have Animals as Leaders, who have the most confusing drummer of all time. And things like that, or with guitar, like Joe Satriani is one of my favorite players for how he plays like one note or one phrase and his tone. I think it's just totally beautiful. But a lot of his songwriting, once I started getting into prog and like more complicated and nerdy stuff, it wasn't doing enough for me for those interests. So I would think like, I would love to play a simple melody like Joe Satriani, but put it over a riff that's like Dream Theater with Virgil Donati playing drums. And so the whole time that I've been making music, I've been coming across these different players and bands and sounds and trying to figure out, I guess what I was saying before about why I love this genre. Like what would it sound like to take this thing that I love and put this other thing that I love into it. And even with tones now, it's like I still want to write music in odd time signatures and with interesting harmony and maybe like technical riffs that take a while to figure out how to play. But what does it sound like with like a fuzz guitar, or like this some other tone that I haven't heard used in that way, or something like that? then I guess specifically with guitar playing, I guess I fell in love with like Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, John Petrucci, Yngwie, people like that. So I was like, I need a guitar with a whammy bar. Like that needs to be part of how I play guitar, because I just love that sound. And then after a few years of sort of playing in a style that's a combination of them mixed with someone that doesn't like practicing, so is never going to get as technically good as their idols, I found players like Guthrie Govan or Tim Miller, and like people that don't necessarily have a whammy bar but do a lot of sliding or bending. And so then I would be like, what can I borrow from the way they phrase, but put it with like this Joe Satriani tone on this Dream Theater riff with Virgil Donati playing. So it's just like all these little things, and just trying to see like what happens when you combine them. And so if so far that has ended up sounding like me, that's kind of just part of the experiment, I guess. And once I start releasing trap beats, like you'll probably disagree that it sounds like me anymore, and I've probably gone too far. But yeah, I guess being open to constantly incorporating new things into your playing or your writing or your signal chain or anything like that. Now I'm going to play a song that I haven't played since we were on tour, and there'll probably be lots of improvisation. But afterwards, you'll all ask questions. Thank you. Who's got a question? Yeah. The question was, when you write music, how do you find other musicians and get them to care about the project? I love that way of phrasing the question. We all sound so defeated. Maybe the question is, how do you inspire other musicians to collaborate with you on the art that you've poured your soul into? I don't know, I'm still trying to figure it out. When I started, trying to think what the first guest solo I had was. I think it was Jake, who's the guitarist in my band. So I met him firstly on Facebook because he has another band called the Helix Nebula who were making like crazy technical instrumental metal. He's from Sydney, I'm from Sydney, and it's not a very big scene. So I kind of just came across him and added him on Facebook, if anyone remembers what that is. And we used to chat and share music with each other. Must have been for like 3 or 4 years before I had recorded and released anything. But I guess I had a song, and I basically just sent it to him and was like, do you want to play a solo on this? Because something that I found very early on when I was writing like instrumental guitar music is if I put too many spaces for guitar solos in a song, I would run out of like vocabulary that I found interesting to listen to. And I guess as an aside, I think that's one thing that has helped me keep wanting to push myself with how I play the guitar is I'll write these songs, and actually this even happened a few weeks ago. I finally started writing some new music and came up with a solo section, and my first thought was like, I don't want to play on it. I don't like what I do when I solo because I haven't put time into like expanding the way I play in a while. But I just met this sick sax player, so maybe it's a sax solo. And then I was messing around with like a different guitar tone that sort of had a synth layered into it. And this like tiny little bit of confidence emerged where I was like, maybe I can do it. Maybe if I use like a sound that I haven't used before and sort of work on some new interesting lines, maybe sort of like a sax player would play, I might be able to play the solo section on my own song. So I sent this song to Jake because that's a song called Heart that sort of has like a main melody and then a verse solo sort of thing, then a main melody, then another verse thing. So I was like, kind of like a rap song where a guest takes the second verse sometimes. I was like, Jake can do it. So sent it to him, and he played a solo, and sort of that was that. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I started to, whenever I'd come across like a repeated section or something like that, I might ask someone that I happened to be friends with to play the solo, and eventually started doing this with other instruments. But the first couple of EPs I made were all programmed drums, programmed bass, because I didn't have the budget to like pay a real musician to do it, and I also didn't necessarily have the confidence that I could get them interested in doing a good job. But I did know that if I spent just hours and hours like tweaking my own programmed drums, I could do my best impersonation of like Mike Portnoy and Virgil Donati's Love Child. So that's what I did for ages, was just trying to do everything myself. And I guess that resulted in having some level of people interested in listening to it. So then when I started to ask other people to get involved, I guess for them it was like, yeah, well, I guess like people seem to care about this. It could be fun. And these days, pretty much everyone that I work with I've known for a little while before. So we're friends. We probably have some sort of mutual respect. And when I get them involved, I give them little to no instructions. And I've found that is really useful, because if you're asking another musician to play on your song or play on your band or work with you in some way, I imagine it would feel good when you're the musician being asked to feel like the other person is asking you because they like what you do and they trust that whatever you add to their music will be awesome, instead of you sort of trying to micromanage them to get a result that you want. So the more, like, I've been recording with a drummer called Chris since 2018, and he plays in the band as well, live. The first stuff we did together, because I was sort of used to it, I'd programmed the drums pretty specifically and sent them to him to sort of learn and tweak a little bit. But as we got to know each other more, and actually he's been a huge influence on the way I write, just because it's opened me up to a whole way of drumming that I wasn't familiar with. And now when I go to write music, I sort of hear that sort of thing in my head, and it makes it come out differently to it would have 10 years ago. So I'll write a song, and now I'm just getting more and more vague with the instructions I give him, because I know that he'll come up with something cool. And I can't speak on his behalf, but I think as long as I continue to write interesting music with space for interesting drumming on it, I think he'll continue to be sort of like, I guess, interested or inspired to see what he can add to it, because I don't think I've ever instructed him of anything. I might be like, can you try, when we're recording, like, can you try the left crash instead of the right, just because I'm like sitting in a control room and I want to hear it come out of a certain speaker. But I think, yeah, just like letting the other musician have the space to do whatever they want and feel like it'll be appreciated is a great way to go about it. That and money. Money's like, you can forget everything I just said. If you have a big budget, I'm sure you can get anyone to do anything. Yep. That's a great question. That's sassy. The first guitar I got was like a 3/4 scale nylon string. There used to be a ukulele in my house when I was growing up, and I played it too hard and the body collapsed. So I went to a music store with my parents. I think I was 9. And they were like, do you want a new ukulele? And I was like, oh, maybe I'll try a guitar. So I got this 3/4 scale, like the cheapest possible nylon string, and played that for basically 2 years before I got an electric. I used to get a thin piece of paper. You probably have nylon strings in this school, if not at home. I got a thin piece of paper and like looped it in and out of the bridge, and it rattled and it sort of sounded like distortion. So that was like my electric guitar for a while. I could play like Blink-182 and stuff like that. And then for my 11th birthday, I got a really shit Strat copy, which I think my parents have now stored it permanently away. But I drew in a Sharpie Darth Vader. It was black with a white pick guard. I drew Darth Vader on it because I thought that would be really cool. And then a couple of years later, I took all the frets out, but I actually didn't know how to make a fretless, so it was literally just a fretless guitar. Wasn't great. But so I had that from 11 to 15, I think. And at this point, I was like recording music either into a cassette recorder. This might have still been when I was using my distorted nylon string guitar, but I used to record into a cassette recorder. None of you know what that is, but it doesn't matter. It's like old. So disappointed. I'd record into that, take the cassette out, put it in like the hi-fi stereo, press play, press record, and like record a second layer into that. So that was like my introduction to multi-tracking. And then eventually we had a laptop in the house and GarageBand came out, so I could do the same sort of thing. Again, going back to talking about tone, I would record this nylon string into like the webcam mic of a laptop and then put distortion, not guitar distortion, but literally just a plugin called distortion on it. And you'd hear like my dad cleaning, feeding back in the background, like knives and forks. It was awful. But so I was doing that, and I guess that was enough sort of proof to my parents that I was relatively serious about making music. So then I got an Ibanez S series, and that was like my first real guitar. Yeah, and because like I would look at guitar magazines and everyone played Ibanez, like everyone that I could possibly care about played Ibanez. So I got that guitar. It had like a floating bridge and a whammy, so I could actually learn like how to sort of sound like all these players that I loved. And I was running that through a Boss multi-effects pedal that I got my uncle to buy. He was like on a business trip to Asia, I think, and this was back in the day when the price of stuff was different in different places. So like by someone physically going to the country, they could get it for cheaper. So he brought me back this multi-effects pedal, which again didn't have like a cab sim or anything like that. I would just turn on the distortion button and play it like through a stereo speakers. But then I started learning like Trivium and Lamb of God and some Dream Theater and Steve Vai and that sort of thing. And that was, I guess that was when I kind of knew what a good guitar felt like. And I had a friend who had Les Paul. I forget what it's, not Epiphone, but it was sort of like a cheaper Les Paul. It might not have been real, actually. I'm not sure. But then, so that I got to experience playing a different sort of guitar, and I was like, well, I don't know if I like this. It's very heavy, and the pickups sort of sound like not like the cool metal that I like. So I got to try a couple of different things. And then there's a band called Scale the Summit that were getting popular. They did a tour with Dream Theater, and Tosin Abasi and Misha from Periphery all were playing Strandbergs. So I saw these and I was like, this looks cool. I don't know if you all agree, but I just thought like that's the coolest looking guitar I've seen. Forgotten the question again. Yeah, so I found this guitar just like so incredibly good looking that I was like, I think that's the guitar that I want. And so I'd been playing this Ibanez since I was 15, which was in 2007. So I was playing it for 7 years, and at this point it was starting to get like a little bit rusty, and I felt like I was ready for a new guitar. So I was kind of deciding between a John Petrucci Signature, which seemed like the most obvious because he got like the whole range of tones I love, from like super clean to super distorted, giant lead tone. A Parker Fly, just again because it looked kind of different, or a Strandberg. And at this point, Strandberg, Ola was just making them like one-off guitars in his garage. So I signed up to the wait list. And I must have put out a couple of EPs, I think, and the wait list was like taking its sweet time. So I was like, I wonder if I can try and speed this up a bit. So I sent him an email being like, hello, I am incredible guitarist. And I guess basically out of luck, he had just started doing production models in a factory. So he was like, I guess maybe I can help you out, weird kid. And so I got to play my first Strandberg, and it was just as sick to play as it looked. I should know this, but I forget, but the Strandberg slogan is like, sound good, feel great, or like sound great, play better, something like that. It's like something vaguely positive. But I've known Ola now for almost 10 years, and something that's important to him that's become important to me is just whatever guitar or instrument or anything that you play, any equipment you use or anything like you do. Hello. Where are they tuning in from? Okay. Should inspire you to use it. Like, so if I have a Strandberg sitting in the corner, I look at it and I'm kind of like, maybe I want to play you. Whereas if you have a guitar that you don't like the look of, it'll just sit there. And like it helps that it's super comfortable and all that sort of thing. Like you can watch a video on YouTube to sell you one. But so this is the guitar to me that I see and I want to pick up and play. And that to me is more important than anything to do with specs. But I guess I'm fortunate that I'm playing a guitar that's like in the higher end of guitars that are made. So I can kind of take for granted like everything in it's good quality, like it's well made, using good parts, that sort of thing. And I'm starting to get into, I've been slowly getting into it, but like finer details, like pickups. Like as you all know, once you get used to something, you can start to critique it and be like, I wish 2.3K was a little quieter or something like that. So it's like this small adjustment process of everything about it. But yeah, I think the most important thing for me is just that it is something that I want to use. We're going to play a show on Halloween in Portland or Seattle or something. And if I can convince my band to wear costumes, I really want to get a really bad BC Rich for that show. Like it's the super sharp angular one. You can get them with like spider cobwebs on them or like blood. And the headstock's like, it looks like a Lord of the Rings tower. They're just like the most evil looking guitar. And because I guess that's the same principle, like it's Halloween, I want to play the guitar that is the most hilarious to me that I could play. And I think purely out of how funny it would be to me, that would make up for how awful it would feel to play. And so I guess, yeah, that's why I like Strandberg. Yep. So is that when you have a song, do you plan the release date? I've done a bit of both. I think the first two EPs that I released, I had recorded the second one first. So I spent like a year putting all the songs together and figuring things out, like how do I program drums, how do I program bass. And then one break. So I went to university and studied architecture, but I spent most of the time out of uni making music. So we had probably like a month holiday in the middle of the year, and I recorded what became the first EP in like a week, just for fun. And because it happened to get finished properly first, I just kind of released it. Also because I didn't really know anything about what goes into a release. I put it on Bandcamp before I knew like how do I even put it on iTunes. Like this is again like something that I just had no idea how it works, and then had to go into a rabbit hole of like there's all these different distributors who has like the fairest commission or like all these different little things that I don't want to know. I just want to make music, but I also like the idea of just learning this ultimately useless information because it makes it easier for the next time. So I guess, yeah, like first EP I just kind of threw at the internet and then figured out like, oh, I can also put it on Spotify. And then a few months later, a year later or something, I was like, oh, I could like put it on a CD and then sell some CDs as well. And then every now and then I've put out songs where I would finish it on the day and then just release it like that. But as things have become like more professional and serious, I guess I've started doing what other people with more experience than me recommend. For some reason, music is released on Fridays now, so I just kind of take that for granted and pick a Friday. In 2021, I recorded an EP. We finished recording the drums for it at the end of the year, and then 2022, travel started happening again, and we started touring. So Simon, who's my bass player, also mixes everything now, because I hit a point with mixing where I was like, I'm not passionate enough about learning how to get better, so I'm going to hand it over to this guy. So he started mixing things for the last few records, but because we were on tour, he couldn't mix it, so it's just been slowly pushed back more and more. There was a point where we had a tour booked that was meant to be the EP release tour, but I kind of thought, like, why am I booking a tour about something that doesn't even exist yet? Because I had a conversation with my booking agent, who's kind of like, what are you doing? Like, let's book something. What do you got? I'm like, well, I got like a fantasy of an EP. We could do that. And then I was talking to Simon about it. I was like, do you think you can finish this by this date so we can do a tour for it? And I forget exactly what he said, but it was along the lines of, no one's going to give that much of a fuck about the tour, but you probably want your EP to be good. So I was like, okay, I've officially removed the deadline, take as long as you want, and let's just make it awesome. So he's now had a couple of months off tour to be working on it, and I think it's coming together well. And with way more like advanced time than needed, I just picked the last day in the calendar that people tell me is sensible to release music, which is like the last Friday in November. So hopefully this EP comes out. I think it's November 24th. Because I guess now when I release something, I also work with a couple of publicists who will try and get reviews in magazines, even though I kind of dislike the concept of a music review, because it takes almost as long to read the review as it would take to just listen to a song and see if you like it yourself. But I guess it is a good way to have other people find out about it, and I do ultimately want to play to more people. So listening to the advice of publicists, which is like, please don't give me 1 week, because they have like their whole delicate ecosystem with all these like relationships they've built up over years with different magazines and websites, where it's awkward for them to be like, I have this instrumental guitar album, can you do a review of it? Oh, but it comes out tomorrow, so can you like do it now? And most people probably wouldn't want to do that. So in order to be, I guess, respectful of what they do, I now want to give them like 3 months or whatever they want with it. So it's kind of evolved into something seemingly professional. But I think the main thing for me now is not to put a deadline on anything for a reason other than wanting to make it good, because the most important thing is the quality of the music, and then everything else can kind of follow that. But I guess I would say when you're starting out to try different things, because one thing that I know feels shit as the person making the music is to wait, because chances are by the time it's been like 2 or 3 months since you finally decided you were happy enough with it to call it finished, you've probably evolved and you won't like it anymore, and then you won't be that excited to share it. Yeah, I think there's I don't really know anyone that makes good music that has fucked up either way. Like, if you've made something that you're proud of, it doesn't matter whether you release it tomorrow or in a year, because you're probably going to release more music after that too, and like you'll figure out sort of what helped the most people find out about the new song, and then once they've found it, because it's something that you care about, they're probably going to like it and then find your older song. So I'd say it's worth kind of just experimenting with all this stuff, find out what feels the best to you as like a sensitive artist, and then also what seems to work the best if you're interested in statistics and stuff like that. But yeah, I think kind of just openly experimenting with everything and not being too worried about the outcome, because you're probably going to be doing this for quite a while, and like it's all building in the same direction. That was an extremely long answer. Hopefully it answered the question. Yep.
When you program drums and send it to your drummer, how different or similar is it to what you programmed? Like, how much do you want them to stray away from what you programmed, or stay to, I want you to play exactly what I programmed on the song? And part two of that, who's your favorite drummer to work with and why?
So when I started out, I would have almost fully programmed things. I wouldn't necessarily say stick to this, but I guess the first drummer that I worked with on an EP was Marco Miniman, who's like, he's insane. He recorded 3 songs in like within a day of receiving them. So like he heard them for the first time, learnt them, recorded them. And he's, I think because he's so experienced and professional with like session recording, he just has an instinct for like what he should stick to and what he can sort of play with. But I totally left that to him, except I think there was one part where I asked for like a less crazy approach. But if that was now, I think I wouldn't even ask for the revision, because to me the thing that makes me happy is that I've made a song that I think is cool, and I've found a person whose style of an instrument I think is cool, and like whatever they do, I'm happy with. It's like sort of just hand it over. Yeah. But with my current drummer, Chris, I sort of program enough that he knows the feel that I'm going for, but I usually don't bother with things like fills unless they're very specifically like attached to a guitar part. Because I know he is a drummer who's passionate about getting better at drums and finding new vocabulary on the drums. So chances are he's probably been working on something new that he wants to incorporate as well. And that kind of makes it fun for me as well, because I don't necessarily know how it's going to turn out, which usually makes me like the song even more, because there's like parts of it that had nothing to do with me, so I can actually like them without being like bad. So what was the second part, sorry?
Just who's your favorite drummer to work with and why?
The 2 drummers, I guess I've played live with 3 drummers, but the 2 main ones that I've toured with are Troy Wright and Chris Allison, and I've had the best time with both of them. I would happily play with either of them, because both of them take what they do extremely seriously and want to do the best job possible at all times. But also, they both like to have fun. Yeah, I think the thing that's been really cool about working with Chris is he comes from originally a death metal and then pretty quickly after that a jazz background. So he's got a whole very different world to like the prog metal drumming that I got super into. So he'll bring ideas into a song, like where I would program a crash cymbal and like every kick accent. He'd be like, I'm not going to touch a cymbal until like 3 minutes into the song. So like when you finally get it, you're like, stuff like that. And then once we've had that conversation, that's something that I'll think about next time I'm writing a song. Like, how can I build a drum part more like that? Yeah.
Help you kind of learn more about how to
Yeah, exactly. And like, there's a whole world of like modern jazz drummers like Mark Juliana and Nate Wood who play in a way, I guess, sort of like Virgil Donati, but in a different way, where they could be playing in 7, but it's not necessarily obvious that it's in 7. And that's, again, being like a huge influence. But you'll hear more on the stuff that'll come out on November 24th, hopefully, where I can stick to one time signature for a whole song, but because I've sort of instructed Chris to be confusing, you can kind of get some new ideas out of like the same time signatures. Is that a hand? Sorry, I can't see. Yes. Sorry, can you say again? Oh, the true temperament frets. I guess this proves my point about playing a guitar that I'm inspired to pick up when I look at it. In Gothenburg in Sweden, we played a show last year, and a couple of the guys that work for this company that does these frets came to the show, and they brought a Strandberg, a Strat, and a Les Paul, all with the frets. So if you haven't seen them before, the reason they're squiggly is because normal guitar frets are sort of like an approximation of the correct notes, but these are actually calibrated so they're perfect or true temperament, which I have found does make a difference, especially for playing chords like in the upper register. I would try to demonstrate, but I have just come from a plane and I put new strings on this morning, and I would hate to play a chord and then it's not perfectly in tune. But like when it's done right, it is noticeably like more sparkly because of how tuned it is. So these guys came to the show with these guitars, and at the time, Strandberg were making this guitar, which was the first one with this body to have a tremolo and like the bridge humbucker and a single coil neck pickup. So I already sort of had this weird guitar being made, and then I played the frets, and I was just like, this looks cool. And the thing that I love about Strandberg is all the design features that I think look cool were done intentionally and meaningfully. Like this cut down here, so you can sit with it like this comfortably. The neck profile is like an ergonomic, asymmetrical shape. So to me, like a Strandberg is kind of design decisions that make other guitars seem wrong. And so I loved the idea of like, this is what frets actually should look like now that we have the technology to do it. So I messaged Ola and was like, can you put true temperament frets on this guitar you're making? And he was kind of like, okay. And now I just love it because this is the only one. And I'm trying to get them to like make a production model, but it is quite insanely expensive. But yeah, basically just having something that looks cool. Any more questions, or I'll play a song. Yep. Sorry? Oh. When I was making my first EP, and I needed artwork for it, I knew a guy called Alex from, I think, 7-String Guitar Forum, which is like a popular place where people were sharing like demos and getting feedback on mixes and stuff like that. He had a band, and so I kind of knew him from stuff that he'd shared, but I also knew that he was a graphic designer. And just because of this, I asked him to make an album cover. I should probably go through my old Facebook messages and find out exactly how it happened, but I think I was just like, album cover, and then he just did it. And he put a moon on it, Um, and I just kind of liked the way it looked. So for the second EP cover, he put a big moon on it. And so at that point, it just kind of became a thing. Not for any real reason other than it was a thing and therefore it became a thing. And then for the third EP cover, I'm actually not sure. There's probably a moon on it. I can't actually picture it in my head. But at this point, I was just like, I guess that's my logo now, and started putting it on everything. So when it came time to do a guitar, like I've always hated the idea of putting my actual name in letters on anything. So it's kind of nice just having a symbol. Like now I got the cheesy pics too. So it just kind of came out of nowhere and just remained. Maybe I should come up with a story. Like I've always been fascinated by the moon in the sky, and this is the shape that it was when I was born. So this is like I don't know. It is. So I landed yesterday, and my friend took me to, I've already forgotten what it's called. It's like this garden, kind of east, maybe Pasadena, Huntington Gardens. There's like, they got all these different styles of garden, and we went to the Japanese garden, and we were sitting on a bench looking at like this Zen rock garden, and I was like, hey Dylan, do you have any cool advice that I can pass on to the students at MI tomorrow? And I've forgotten what he said. It was good. I'm going to try and remember. But then I was like, man, it'd be so cool tomorrow. I can be like, yeah, yesterday I was sitting in this Japanese Zen rock garden and I realized that. But now I've forgotten what the... So that's, yeah, welcome to my life. I'll try to remember what he said, though. Yeah. It wasn't that good. It was, like, pretty good. Any further questions? Alrighty, I'll play a song. I will try and think what he said. I mean, what I thought. Thank you. Any final questions? All right then. Well, I didn't remember what he said, but I'm almost certain it was along the lines of, if you're already doing the thing, you'll probably do the thing, which I took to mean, this is a great like Zen rock garden moment. I was just like, I think the fact that you're here at a music school pursuing music, like, in my opinion, it's the same as when I'm at home writing a new song. I feel like that's the point where I've made it, because I'm doing the thing that I like. So hopefully I haven't unlearnt too much knowledge from you today. And yeah, good luck with everything. Have fun. If I can do it, it's almost certain that you can too. And thank you.